Most people believe that cruelty is a choice, that the toxic people in your life, the self-centered, demanding, and manipulative ones, could simply decide to be better. They can't, not entirely. But the crucial distinction lies in where the damage is. Is the damage in the wiring itself, or is it in the switch? That's the difference between a narcissist and a psychopath. And it's the difference between an annoying drain on your life and an existential threat. Scientists put narcissists and psychopaths in MRI machines. What they found will shock you. In my decades of consulting on high-stakes cases, I've learned that every lie, every act of manipulation, has a physical origin. It's not just bad parenting, it's bad circuitry. We need to talk about empathy, not as a warm, fuzzy feeling, but as a complex neural function. The failure to connect is the failure of the mirror neuron system. Think of your brain as having a set of specialized mirror neurons. When you watch someone stub their toe, your mirror neurons fire as if you stubbed your toe. This system is the biological foundation of empathy. It allows you to feel, viscerally, what another person is feeling. Now, imagine the two distinct ways this mirror can be broken. 1. The narcissist. They have a damaged mirror. It works, but it's self-serving. It only reflects emotions back to them in terms of their own utility, their own pain, or their own validation. The mirror can function, but their deep-seated shame keeps the switch flipped off, unless it's about them. 2. The psychopath. They have an absent mirror. The essential component is missing or radically underactive. The feeling is simply not generated. They can see your pain, but their brain registers it the way yours registers the temperature of the room. Data, not distress. Let me tell you about Agent B. A colleague of mine once described trying to teach a high-scoring psychopath basic emotional recognition. The psychopath learned to identify a distressed face, the furrowed brow, the downturned mouth, but only by memorizing the features like a foreign language. When asked what the person felt, the psychopath simply said, "They look like they're about to give me money," or cry. Pure utility, zero feeling. This distinction is key to your safety. The narcissist has a heart that is shielded and suffocated by ego. The psychopath has an engine where the heart should be. Have you ever met someone who seems to feel pain, but only when it directly involves them? Keep that observation handy. Type "continue" to receive the next section. Let's dive into the narcissist's brain, as revealed by research. When scientists put a high-scoring narcissist in an MRI and show them images of people in distress, their empathy circuits do show some activation. The mirror neuron system is functional. The capacity is there. However, the activity often quickly shifts or gets overridden by other brain regions, specifically the parts associated with self-reference and reward. What this means: the narcissist starts to register your pain, but almost immediately, their brain translates that signal into 1. Shame. My actions caused this, and that means I am flawed. 2. Rage. This person's suffering is inconveniencing my perfect image. 3. Validation. Their dependence on me makes me feel powerful. The activation is quickly hijacked by the ego. The empathy does not lead to genuine compassion. It leads to a defensive cascade of internal panic and external aggression. Let me tell you about Eleanor. Eleanor was a malignant narcissist I consulted on. She once found her daughter crying over a broken toy. She didn't comfort the child. She started screaming at her, asking how she could be so careless and how she was ruining the evening. Her internal monologue was, "And my child is hurt." It was my child's display of emotional messiness is a reflection of my failure as a mother, and I must suppress this evidence. The rage was a defense mechanism against her own shame. The narcissist's shame loop. This is a cycle of deep, unacknowledged insecurity leading to defensive grandiosity, leading to harmful action, leading to shame, which starts the cycle over. This loop keeps the empathy switch off. They can feel, but they are terrified of doing so because it leads directly to the unbearable feeling of inadequacy. Practical implication. If you can temporarily bypass the ego, if you can get them to empathize with a third, neutral party, they might show a flicker of genuine connection. But the moment the focus shifts back to their actions, the shield goes up immediately. Do you ever notice a moment of genuine human feeling from them, immediately followed by a furious act of self-defense? That flicker is the narcissist's damaged circuit trying to fire. Type "Continue" to receive the next section. Now, let's look at the psychopath. The research here, especially the groundbreaking work out of the University of Wisconsin by scientists like Dr. James Blair, is chillingly clear. When a high-scoring psychopath is put in the scanner and shown images of distress or fear, the crucial emotional processing centers of the brain often remain dark. The key player here is the amygdala, often called the brain's fear and emotion center. For most people, seeing someone in pain activates the amygdala. For many psychopaths, the amygdala is underactive or even structurally reduced. What this means: there is no internal, visceral feeling of distress, fear, or guilt generated when they witness suffering. The biological signal that says, "Stop, this is wrong, this hurts," is simply missing. They don't have to suppress their empathy like the narcissist. It was never generated in the first place. Let me tell you about Agent T. A former colleague who specialized in interviewing violent offenders described a psychopath calmly recounting the details of a brutal assault. The psychopath showed no emotion, only a detached, almost bored recounting of facts. When asked if he regretted the damage, he frowned, not in sadness but in confusion, and said, "Regret? I regret getting the blood on my favorite jacket." The biological capacity for remorse was absent. The cognitive versus affective distinction. This is a vital difference. Affective empathy, the ability to feel what another feels. Psychopaths lack this. Cognitive empathy, the ability to intellectually understand what another feels. Psychopaths excel at this. A psychopath knows that crying means sadness and vulnerability, and they use that knowledge to their advantage. Their high cognitive empathy makes them master manipulators, as they can perfectly mimic remorse without ever experiencing it. They are not hiding emotion, they are performing it. When someone apologizes, do you see a flicker of internal pain in their eyes? Or is their apology too perfect, too smooth, and too devoid of genuine feeling? Type "Continue" to receive the next section. Let's use the cognitive versus affective distinction to highlight why the narcissist is fundamentally a less efficient manipulator than the psychopath. The narcissist has a high degree of affective empathy for themselves and a low, highly conditional affective empathy for others. When they manipulate, they are often messy and reactive because they are feeling their way through the interaction. They feel anxiety, they feel the thrill of control, and they feel defensive rage. Their emotional volatility is what makes them predictable. Let me tell you about Dr. Smith. Dr. Smith was a narcissist who ran a small clinic. When challenged by his staff, he would throw a furious tantrum. The tantrum was a genuine, desperate release of his personal anxiety and shame. He was so caught up in the feeling of being wronged that his manipulation became transparent and over the top. He'd fire a loyal employee only to desperately try to rehire them a week later. His emotions got in the way of his long-term plan. The psychopath, having little to no affective empathy, operates solely with cognitive empathy. They don't feel the heat of the moment, which makes their actions entirely cold and rational. They can lie flawlessly, plan long-term schemes, and inflict extreme cruelty because their internal system does not generate the visceral distress that would compel a normal person to stop. Practical example. The narcissist is bad at long cons because their emotional need for immediate supply makes them sloppy and prone to bursts of defensive exposure. The psychopath excels at long cons because they can maintain the perfect mask for years, never faltering, never panicking, and never allowing emotion to compromise the objective. Investigative insight. In interrogations, we could often break a narcissist by creating intense, high-stakes emotional pressure that triggered their shame and forced a chaotic, messy confession. You cannot break a psychopath with emotional pressure, you can only break them with irrefutable evidence and a high probability of consequence. Their lack of feeling is their greatest weapon and their greatest weakness. When their plan fails, do you see a disorganized meltdown of frustration, or a calm, calculated pivot to a new strategy? The reaction tells you everything you need to know about the engine driving their actions. Type Continue to receive the next section. The next logical question is, can they change? This is where the difference in brain structure gives us a small but vital sliver of hope for the narcissist, and virtually none for the psychopath. For the narcissist, change is theoretically possible due to neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections. Since their empathetic circuits are functional, the potential exists to reroute their behavior. Research suggests that intensive, long-term therapy could theoretically help them confront their underlying shame and slowly build a capacity for self-validation that doesn't rely on external supply. They could, in theory, learn to turn the empathy switch on. The massive caveat. The core of narcissism is the inability to acknowledge a personal flaw. The minute the narcissist is told they need intensive, long-term work because they are the problem, their defense system kicks in, and they often reject the process entirely. They will typically only enter therapy when they are under duress and will use the sessions as a stage to perform their healing rather than engaging in genuine self-reflection. Let me tell you about my own empathy test. When interviewing a suspect, I'd often subtly introduce an emotional trigger, a story about a sick child, a vulnerable witness, that had no direct bearing on the case. A normal person shows a flicker of genuine, unfeigned distress. A narcissist might fake distress, but often only in the moments they think you are watching them, and they are usually concerned about how their reaction looks. They are aware of the need to perform. Practical implication. Do not waste your time trying to reason the narcissist into empathy. You cannot be their therapist. Their change has to come from an internal crisis they are willing to face, and the odds of that happening are slim, but not zero. Are you hoping they'll change? Or are you operating based on the reality that they are too invested in their own perfect image to admit they need to? Type Continue to receive the next section. For the psychopath, the scientific findings on brain structure translate to a near impossible prognosis for change. When a functional component of the machine is missing, the amygdala's emotional processing, you can simply train the brain to compensate. The core issue. Psychopathy is often associated with structural differences and genetic components that make the brain physically less capable of generating the chemical and electrical responses necessary for effective empathy. You can teach a psychopath the social script for regret, but you cannot inject the feeling of remorse. The investigative pitfall. We learned early on that traditional talk therapy often made high-scoring psychopaths better manipulators. Therapy gave them a sophisticated new vocabulary for human emotions, which they then used to refine their masks and exploit their next victims. They learned the blueprint for human vulnerabilities more effectively. Relatable analogy. It's like teaching a computer to paint a masterpiece. It can perfectly replicate the brushstrokes, the colors, and the technique, but it cannot feel the human yearning, the joy, or the pain that drove the original artist. The psychopath can perfectly mimic the social performance of empathy, but the internal experience remains blank. The hard truth for your safety. When dealing with a confirmed psychopath, you must proceed with the absolute, non-negotiable understanding that they will not change. They may learn to become more discreet, more sophisticated, and better at avoiding consequences, but the core engine of cold, instrumental control remains. When they face a choice between their convenience and your suffering, do you believe they are capable of a genuine internal struggle? The answer is critical for your safety protocols. Type Continue to receive the next section. We need to bring this back to practical, real-world application. As an interrogation consultant, I had to be able to tell the difference quickly. This is a condensed version of a test you can apply to the behavior of the toxic person in your life. The cracks test. Behavior under pressure. CU, narcissist's reaction. Psychopath's reaction. Facing irrefutable evidence. Chaos. Defensive rage, projection, frantic attempts to shift blame, tears of self-pity. The mask shatters. Calm, measured denial, cold analysis of the evidence, immediate pivot to a new narrative, or silent calculation of exit strategy. The mask drops. Witnessing neutral suffering, selective pity. Pity for the victim only if they can use the moment to appear heroic or moral to an observer. No reaction, flat affect, perhaps a flicker of interest at the novelty of the suffering. Asks, how does this affect my plan? The I'm sorry test. Conditional. I'm sorry you feel that way, or I'm sorry I got caught. A show of pain aimed at eliciting sympathy. Perfect performance. A flawless, textbook apology designed to meet the need of the moment, with no corresponding internal feeling. Let me tell you about John. John was a high-level psychopath in a business case. When confronted with the evidence that ruined his career, he looked the detective in the eye and said, "That's excellent police work. You got me." There was no emotion, no shame, only a detached acknowledgement of their operational success. His concern was not the ruin of his victims, but the inconvenience of his own downfall. The crack. The narcissist's manipulation has seams, the moments where their shame breaks through, or their emotional volatility makes them unpredictable. The psychopath's manipulation is seamless. They are predictable in their cold, rational pursuit of control. When you look for the cracks, are you finding messy seams that lead to a frightened child, or a smooth, polished surface that leads to a cold void? This distinction is the ultimate tool for assessing the danger. Type Continue to receive the next section. Your defense protocol must reflect the pathology. You cannot use the same shield against a narcissistic outburst as you do against a psychopathic plan. Your goal is to cut off the emotional supply. 1. Go gray rock. Become utterly uninteresting. Do not react to their rage, their attempts to elicit praise, or their pity plays. Starve the ego. 2. Use factual boundaries. Use short, emotionless boundary statements. I will not discuss this if you yell. This bypasses the need for emotional negotiation. 3. Recognize the core. Their cruelty is a desperate, defensive move against their own shame. This realization doesn't excuse the behavior, but it stops their insults from being personally devastating. Your goal is to increase the operational friction and eliminate your utility. 1. Strictly transactional. Your interactions must be purely about objective goals. Never discuss personal feelings, dreams, or fears. You are providing them with data. 2. Documentation is life. Create a paper trail for everything. Emails, registered mail, witnesses. Psychopaths thrive in the shadows of ambiguity. Force them into the light. 3. Remove the resource. Determine what they want and remove it immediately. Once you are no longer a useful tool, the psychopath will discard you, often with terrifying speed, for a more viable mark. The brain scans, the research, and the years of interrogation all point to the same truth. Empathy is power. The narcissist chooses not to use it. The psychopath was never given it. Your power is knowing the difference and protecting the integrity of your own circuits. Would you like me to generate the supporting content package based on this script?